Beyond the numbers, everything else in college football is subjective. Whoever you think the best player in the country is, subjective. What programs you think got snubbed out of the college football playoff, that's your opinion. But the thing that people forget about opinions is that there needs to be a reason for how you got to that conclusion. I guess technically you can say that 2 + 2 is 5 and claim that it's your opinion, but all evidence, context, history, and the math itself proves that 2 + 2 is 4. This isn't a video about the philosophy behind objective truth, but there were decades of college football national champions that were crowned based on what essentially, when broken down, were opinions. Before the BCS and college football playoff gave us a national championship game, many of the best teams in the country finished the season without knowing who the best in the land was. The AP poll may say one team, the coaches poll may say another, and that's not even mentioning the dozens of other polls that have some skin in the game. If the writers and contributors to the poll had enough reasoning to say that you are the national champions at the end of the year, it was yours to claim. You are national champions. Whether or not any of these championships hold any sort of weight though, is up to interpretation, and believe me, some of them are weirder than you can imagine. My name is Caleb, and in our bubble of American sports, the postseason tournament and championship game is where legends are made. But in college football before 1998, it was really just the regular season where the best names solidified themselves. It was probably the most prominent sport in the country where there wasn't a single way in determining who the champions were, which led us to having years where the season ended with multiple champions that had good cases for them, and others where you gotta wonder what certain voters and systems were on. The case of and for the claimed national title is one that comes up every once in a while and is prime territory for championship discourse. Claimed national titles are pretty unique to college football, and explaining what they are is pretty simple when you actually look at them in the context of the time period before the BCS and CFP eras respectively games. But before 1990, because there were no tournaments or championship games to crown an outright champion, the most reputable polls in the country would crown who they thought had the best and most complete season in the year. For example, the AP poll, the most recognized poll that fans and teams typically pay attention to, would usually crown whoever was ranked first in the country at the end of the season as national champions. This would give program permission to claim a national title and therefore were considered national champions. It was the most legit way of recognizing a championship back then, and it also meant that bowl games meant a lot more than they do now. If you lose your bowl game and pick up that extra loss at the end of the year, the most reputable polls might see that as a reason to not crown you champions. But the AP poll wasn't the end-all be-all when handing out a title. The coaches poll is considered the other prestigious ranking system, as coaches from around the country submit their own weekly top 25 rankings. As you know, the coaches poll and the AP poll can be almost identical from a week-to-week basis, but a lot of the difference comes at the top. There were years where the AP poll crowned one champion and the coaches poll crowned another, which allowed for multiple teams to have legit national championships in the same year. For example, the 1974 season has two teams that are considered the champions for that year, as the AP poll named Oklahoma their national champions and the coaches poll named USC their national champions. Oklahoma went undefeated at 11-0, but because of recruiting violations at the time, they weren't allowed on the coaches poll, which led to USC, the second best team in the country, to be named their national champions. There have been so many years where multiple teams claimed national championships in the same season, as there was not always a consensus title winner between the two top polls, and that's not even mentioning the 40+ other polls and systems that you probably have never heard of that also have a say. A lot of the lesser known polls are still around today and have crowned some pretty infamous national champions that have both gone claimed and unclaimed. While most of them today will come to the consensus that whoever wins the CFP is the undisputed champ, there are some that go against the grain. Like the 2024 Oregon Ducks have an unclaimed national championship crowned by the Anderson and Hester system that is recognized by the NCAA, but wisely, Oregon has not claimed that championship. Not to pick on the Anderson and Hester system specifically, but there have been tons of championships that teams have claimed from a random poll or system that's really interesting to say the least on how they got to that conclusion. As mentioned before, for the systems that don't use math as a selection format, the absence of a championship game meant that the voters in each poll needed to use evidence and reasoning on why a team should have the opportunity for a national title, bringing us back to subjectivity. So who has the best and worst cases for their claimed national titles? I think most of us will agree that the consensus championships, where the top and most reputable polls come to an agreement on who the national champions are probably considered the most legit, and those who claim them have every right in doing so. They typically have the best record, go undefeated, and have one of, if not the toughest schedule in the country. The powerhouse and historic college football programs kind of built their brands and winning traditions with these claimed championships, and for good reason. The AP poll and coaches poll didn't exist until 1936 and 1950 respectively, so the other systems of ranking in polling were doing all the work. If you go back to the oldest days of college football, you'll see schools that don't even compete at the FBS level anymore that have national championships. Ivy League programs like Princeton and Yale were running college football in the 1800s and early 1900s like Alabama was in the 2010s, and to this day, they both technically have the most national championships in the history of the game. You can argue that it was a completely different game back then and that many of the programs and even schools in some cases that we know today didn't even exist back then, but somebody had to win, right? Some of Princeton's claims are also kind of funny because at one point, they and Rutgers were the only college football programs to exist just in general. No other schools had programs at the time, so they only played each other. 1869 saw them both go 1-1 in a 2-game season, both playing each other, yet it's a national championship they both claim. It's easy to say that a lot of these early natties shouldn't be legitimized, but the pre-poll era of the sport at the time gives them more significance than if it were just how we view them today. And of course, the titles that came in championship games, at least to people today, probably carry the most weight. Not to say they're more legit than the ones before, but the post-polling era gave us a different set of circumstances that are a little bit more concrete. Even though we've had championship games for almost the last 30 years, there are still some interesting claims recognized by both specific programs and the NCAA. 2017 UCF is probably the most infamous national championship claim. They were the only undefeated team in the country to end that year, but because they didn't make the college football playoff, they didn't compete in the actual field. But the Colley Matrix system came to the conclusion that they were in fact the national champions, and UCF would go on to claim that. The only other teams who have claimed a natty in a year where there was a national championship game that they didn't play in was USC in 2003, who actually ended up number 1 in the AP poll without a BCS championship game appearance, and Auburn in 2004, who was crowned champs by the GBE college football rating system. So much of it is, again, subjective. There's a lot of evidence and reasoning on why certain chips are claimed, while so many others just seem kind of silly, whether you agree with them or not. Which leads me to ask how they're even perceived compared to other champions in college football and just other sports in general. It's always going to be a bit harder to be objective without a playoff system or championship game, and even then, there's still subjectivity when choosing the teams who get to compete for said championship. I found myself going through a lot of teams, and for some of their championship claims, it made a lot of sense. Then there were others where I look at it and it'd be like they came in 3rd in their conference, finished with multiple losses, came nowhere near the top 10 in either the AP or the coaches poll, yet some system out there came to the conclusion that they were national champs, whether it was opinion or math based. And that's a reason why there are hundreds of unclaimed national titles, which is another rabbit hole in itself. You'd be surprised at some of the programs that claim national titles that even some of the worst programs ever wouldn't claim. Like Purdue has an unclaimed national title from 1931 that would be their only national championship in football, but it remains unclaimed almost 100 years later. College football is one of the only sports where a championship could be legitimized depending on who you ask. Me personally, if it's recognized by the NCAA as an actual championship, then sure, it's legit. You have it. The NCAA, AP poll, and coaches poll obviously isn't the end all be all, but I might add it technically in there if I ever have to describe how many championships someone has. Should we put more weight on the BCS and later college football playoff titles because we got championship games and we got to see them actually play for it? I think it's a legit question and I'm not sure how to feel about it. I can see the argument for both sides, but I lean towards the opinion of the championship game being a more concrete way of selecting a champion, even if the committee or BCS system previously didn't get it right all the time. But I also think that a lot of the polling era chips and even the ones before are just as valid, even though some of them require a ton of context, not including the weird championship claims that a program might try to add on decades later. So I think just recognizing that prior to the era of a championship game being played, crowning a national champion was legitimate, but also way more complicated than it is now. We haven't even had 30 years of championship games yet. Like, I'm the same age as the national championship game in college football, which is crazy to think about given the history of the sport and how it goes back multiple centuries. I'm curious about how fans and personnel of teams who have multiple national championship claims feel about some of them, and how they recognize the ones that have the best cases and the ones that might seem a bit more questionable knowing what we know now. Winning is the main objective of the game, and if you don't perform up to standard, you'll be getting calls for your job. But the amount of subjectivity and opinions that goes into who we consider the best in the sport beyond what is actually happening on the field is pretty insane to recognize if it's something that you really don't think about. But I will say again, an opinion should be backed with some sort of objectivity. If there are no facts or reasoning for said opinion, it's super easy to dismiss. And in college football, an opinion from somebody, somewhere, has led to a national championship. My name is Caleb. If you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. As always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.